All right, welcome back to the New Equity Network Show. I'm Michael Yorba, your host, and co-host Jared Fabriello. All right, we've got David Duggan, CEO Viral Network Inc. on the show with us today. All right, David, we were talking about some stuff that's very interesting to me because everybody, as far as I'm concerned, from here forward, needs what you do, and you're getting granular about how we define the influencer that you're targeting to drive them to the intended location where people can actually convert them into either a shareholder or a customer or an investor, one, two, or three, which is the main reasons people want to advertise to the world or market to the world. Can you give us, say, a recent example of somebody you've worked with that and what the processes were and get into the results?
Absolutely. So we've been lucky enough over the last 4 years of being in business to forge very long-term and lasting relationships with most of our clients, and the majority, actually 60% of our initial client base are still with us. And a lot of that has to do with the amount of people, the pool of investors that we can reach through these online marketing tactics. It's just huge in comparison to the normal way to tell a story. So when we first get to the drawing board with a new client, the example I'm going to give you is about a company called High Bank Resources. Mm-hmm. They trade on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol HBK. And we were chatting for a little bit, and they came to me and said they have a great story, but they knew that they didn't have a very important news release that they weren't sure if it was going to come out in 2 months, maybe a year, but they were trying to get permits on their property that would allow them to actually get into production. And, everyone who's familiar with the resource space always knows that final permitting issue is usually the biggest catalyst that companies are trying to work towards. So when we first started chatting, our team ran some numbers, and we knew that when we filtered down to the types of people that would be most likely to invest in High Bank, we knew that there was roughly about 4.6 to 5 million investors that we could reach online in North America using all these tactics. So that was the very specific micro-targeted niche. So when we wanted to put a campaign together, we needed to realize that there's two different ways a public company can tell its story. There's the factual day-to-day story, the fundamental value of what they already have, and telling that to new people. If someone's never heard about you before, you have to tell them the basics before they're going to get excited about the catalysts of the big news releases. So because the research we did showed that there's such a massive amount of people that probably had never heard about them before, we have to start with telling the basic story first. So we got together and we said, what's the best way to tell your story? And, without trying to offend anyone, a lot of public companies, aside from being face-to-face with the CEO or the IR person, don't do the best job telling or selling the story. Websites tend to be very sporadic and spread out. So the first step that we took with High Bank Resources was to simplify the story all onto one landing page, and we call it a virtual investor center. So that virtual investor center is designed to tell someone the entire story, but also have calls to action built in, so they join the email list or call in to the IR person. So the first step is for all of us to sit around the table and be able to look at the virtual investor center and say, hey, this is the best version of our sales pitch, and any new person who sees this fundamental description should at least understand everything that we've already got, the current value proposition, and then the blue sky potential of what we're working towards, which in High Bank's case was the permitting issue. So once we had this landing page, then we decided that the most intelligent use of their marketing dollars, as well as the best way to reach as many people over a short period of time, was to do the typical performance-based online hour package that we're talking here. And we worked out a model that pushed an average of about 1,500 people to that landing page every month. So in order to do that, the marketing and the advertising had to reach between 150 to 200,000 people per month. So you get an enormous amount of exposure. The name, High Bank Resources, the symbol, all gets out to that 150 and 200,000 people, but only 1,500 people decided to click to find out more. So that's what High Bank pays for, is the actual results. Now those people, when they click through, now they're on the landing page that has a very good overview description of the company, all the current value propositions, and then a very specific call to action for them to join the email list. So this, what we call a consistent drip campaign, was set to continue for until the company wanted to switch things up. But we didn't know if the news was going to come out 2 months later or a year later. So it turned out that it was about 8 months of us doing this initial drip campaign. In that time, roughly 10 to 11,000 people visited the landing page. And more importantly, just under 1,000 people decided to join the company's email list and see all their news releases in anticipation for that big news release. So everyone knows that even though 900 is a lot smaller than the millions of people we've been talking about, 900 people that have on their own decided to join the company's list because they want to see when the company achieves their next big catalysts. That's a huge number. And if even half of those people invest, that could be absolutely game changing for the stock and the valuation and everything. So with this real life example, over those first 8 months before the news came out, the company was trading around 8 cents. Over that time, it trended up to 12 cents, which it's a decent move, but it's not game changing. And when they actually were finally ready to put their news out, they came back to me and said, "Well, what's the best way to get our news out to the masses?" And because we've already defined a total potential audience for them of about 5.6 to 6 million potential investors, we can go after a lot more of those people in a very short period of time if the budget's there and if the news is worthy enough to reach that many people. So this goes to the second way to tell a story is the news releases, the catalysts. Those are the things that really drive, tremendous moves in evaluation and whatnot. So we can use the exact same distribution channels, the same marketing techniques, but instead of pushing people to the fundamental story, the virtual investor center that describes everything that's going on, we change all of the advertisements to show just that specific news release. So in this case, we were able to reach approximately 2.5 million people over the course of 2 weeks. We had approximately 15,000 visits to that news release alone. So when Hydneg actually announced that they got their permits, we did this massive feature on it. And using the micro-targeted distribution channels that we already created, went really, really hard with pushing that specific news release. And that ended up having tremendous results. The stock went from 12 cents to 34.5 cents over the course of 2 weeks. So it wasn't a massive overnight big screamer. And it actually held its own. And, if you look at the stock chart, it ended up staying between 26 cents and 30 cents over the course of the next 2 months. It was a phenomenal success. Over that time, it traded probably just under 10 million shares. More importantly, the company was able to raise an additional $2.5 million from their existing shareholder base exercising their warrants that were at 12 cents. So that's a huge testament to this entire system is if the existing shareholder base that bought stock 8 cents in their last private placement was able to sell a lot of their, or most of their position into a 26 cent market and then exercise the 12 cent warrants to the tune of $2.5 million, that's a lot of money that was extracted out of the market that would have had to come from new shareholders and new opinions. So that's the beauty of this whole system in motion. If you tell people the fundamental story and you're working towards a big goal and you actually hit it, then those new people are a lot more likely to get involved and come on in as shareholders. So that's an example of the two different strategies we implement, the long-term, consistent drip performance-based campaign combined with the mass awareness ability of pushing catalytic tech news releases.
We've got 1 minute left. And bottom line me real quick, the cost of that to do that.
We got it down to a science. So it really comes down to how many visitors you want per month. So in this campaign example, it worked out to roughly $6,000 per month, which everyone who's familiar with how much it usually costs to tell a story, that's phenomenally discounted. And then they saved a bigger chunk of their budget and spent roughly $40,000 to push the news release. So the combination of the two things ended up reaching pretty much every potential shareholder they could over the course of the year.
Got to go. But David, thank you so much for bringing that. Everybody needs to get in contact with you. Real quick, give us your web address.
It's www.viralnetworkinc.com.
Perfect. David, thanks so much for being on the show. We'll talk to you real soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. You've been listening to Michael Yorba and Jared Fabriello on the New Equity Network Show. Thanks for tuning in.